Hey everyone, Connie here, and welcome to my first impressions review of Cyberpunk Edgerunners. So, I am going to talk about spoilers in a bit, but I'll leave you I'll let you know when that's going to happen. Let's first start by talking about my hesitation even going into this series initially. See, this series came out and almost instantly got this massive amount of attention. It was huge. It's kind of the new hot shit right now, in the same way that Arcane was. And unlike Arcane, I did not have the same interest in it. Because with Arcane, it's like I had the, previous knowledge from playing League of Legends and everything. And I had this interest in the series because of it. With this, I not only had never played Cyberpunk 2077, I was not only just not interested in it right off the bat, but when it actually came out and I started hearing about it, it it angered me. Because and it's not even just the fact that it had all of these glitch issues and everything, and at launch was to a lot of people practically unplayable. For me, it was their mishandling of queer representation and whatnot. Because they tried to insert some queer representation for the game. The only problem is the way that they handled it was kind of transphobic and really just poorly done. And it made the entire thing come across as them not really putting forth any effort into truly trying. One of the big issues, as an example, was the fact that, oh, we're going to allow characters to look any which way, no matter what your gender is listed as. You wear any clothing, or you can have your design look any way. But if you choose the female gender, your voice will always be stereotypically female, no matter what. If you choose the male gender, your voice will always be stereotypically male, no matter what. Despite that just not really working for trans people. And a lot of trans people complained about this. And it's like, okay, I'm a trans woman. I can make it look like me, but my character has to sound like a cis woman, has to have a higher voice when I have a deeper voice. This isn't representative of me. And some people may say that that's a minor thing. But the thing is, for a trans person, that's a big deal. That's a really big deal. Because they're touting this as this big thing for representation with this character creator, and yet they do something just so basic that they easily did not need to do. They easily could have made it so that you could have any voice. Saints Row did this. The Saints Row games did this. I played a little bit of Saints Row 3, and even that had the ability to just choose basically whatever the fuck voice you want for any body model you want, and your gender is like completely your own thing. And it's like, Saints Row 3 has better character creator for queer representation than this. And it's appalling. It's not acceptable at this point. It's not acceptable to tout your character creator as being super queer and trans exclusive and then just have it not be. That's not acceptable. If they didn't say anything, that's the thing. If they didn't make those claims, it wouldn't be as big a deal, because then they wouldn't have been riding on those claims. And a lot of people try to excuse stuff like this, and that's only one of the issues, by the way. Try to excuse stuff like this, but oh, there's a trans girl character in the game, and it's like, one thing like that does not excuse all the bad. though. Just because there's a trans girl character in the game doesn't mean the trans rep is good. Technically speaking, there's a trans character in Alien, or is it Aliens? One of the two, one of the Alien movies. But you wouldn't know that unless you really paid attention to this file on a computer that's shown very briefly. There's a single character in one of the Alien movies who is trans, but it never tells you that. And unless you look at the background of pretty much everything thoroughly, you wouldn't know. That's not good representation. Because here's the thing, we want to get to a point where we don't have to say it, where it's just natural, but we're not at that point yet. Where we are in reality, we need to mention it. It needs to be talked about. It needs to be a part of the character. Because that's just where we're still at, unfortunately. Hiding it in a small thing in the background that's there for like a very short amount of time is not representation. It's not even the bare minimum. But enough about my ranting on that. Let's actually talk about what I thought of the episode. So I was obviously very, as I said, hesitant going into this because it is based off of Cyberpunk 2077. And it's, again, just not really something I was super interested in the first place because I'm not a big Cyberpunk person. It's not my thing. So I went into this episode, admittedly, not super hyped. And I came out of it, admittedly not super hyped, but not as upset as I figured I was going to be. Just to put it non-spoilery before we begin with the spoilers, it was okay. It wasn't great. I wouldn't even say it was really that good, but it wasn't bad either. It was okay, and I don't see the hype like that's surrounding it. Maybe future episodes will explain that, but I don't get it. But also the episode as a whole is not like offensive or terribly written or anything. It's just kind of generic and boring to me, if I'm being honest. And that's my non-spoiler thoughts. So, we will begin with spoilers, though. And, yeah, for the rest of this review, pretty much, I'm just going to be talking about what happens during the course of the first episode and my thoughts on that. If you have not seen the first episode of Cyberpunk Edgerunners and you wish to remain spoiler-free, I would suggest turning this off at this point. Again, just general thoughts, spoiler-free, is that I was just kind of bored by it. It wasn't that interesting. It wasn't anything special or unique. It was honestly super generic. But we will begin with the actual spoiler part in 3, 2, 1, now. Okay, so I know I probably already angered a bunch of fans of this, and I could imagine all of the downvotes coming in already. Or dislikes, or whatever you want to call it. Let's talk about the spoilers. So this is a story about this kid whose name I cannot remember because he's entirely unmemorable. He's a poor kid living with his single mother in Night City, I think it's called. A cyberpunk futuristic city where everything sucks. And I mean literally everything. There is not a single good, positive, likable thing about this place. And that's a problem. See, here's the thing. Maybe I'm wrong here, but from what I have always known about Cyberpunk, again, from someone who's not super into it in general, but Cyberpunk is supposed to be appealing. It's supposed to be something that you want to see, that you're excited about. It's like, oh, this cool cybernetic future and everything. It's got this gritty, grimy look to it, and it's cool and everything. And it's like you kind of wish you could be in that world. And it's like I'm watching this episode, and it's like this is one of the absolute most terrible settings I have seen in anything. I'm not even joking. Like, this is one of the. I would rather be in fucking Attack on Titan than this, in terms of, like, which fictional world I would want to go into. That would be a lot more pleasant than this. Everything about this world is terrible. The aesthetic looks fucking gross. And I know, again, the grimy nature, the punk nature of the cyberpunk aesthetic and everything. But it's like, it just doesn't look good. Like, they could have easily made this look appealing and interesting and everything, but they don't. The technology stuff doesn't look good at all. It just looks gross. On top of that, everyone fucking sucks. And the only characters who don't suck, actually, the only single character is the mom. And she's just flatter than hell. She is such a flat, boring, generic mother character. There is no depth to her. Okay, I have to specify. Not just a flat, boring, generic mother character, but a flat, boring, generic, poor mother character. That's a distinction. Like, if you've seen Treasure Planet, honestly, if you've seen Treasure Planet, you've seen this episode. Because it's practically the same thing. But if you've seen Treasure Planet, if you've seen Jim Hawkins' mom from that, you've seen the mother here. Again, I don't remember the names. I don't care that much because they're so unmemorable as characters as it is. But she's basically the same. Just instead of, running a bed and breakfast or whatnot, it's like she's just... I don't ever actually think it says what she does. She works outside of the home to try and support her and her son. But it's the same basic concept. And the entire thing basically is, our main character is this slightly troubled teen who is having trouble fitting in until some big event happens and he has to start taking things more seriously and go off on his own to find himself and grow as a character. That explains perfectly both Treasure Planet and this. In Treasure Planet, the big event was, of course, the spaceship crashing and Jim getting the map. In this, it's our main character's mother dying after a crash, after a car crash that's caused by super criminals or something. It's like that just kind of comes out of nowhere. Even with the opening starting in such a bombastic way, it's like suddenly later in the episode, it's like, oh, we're driving along the highway. All of a sudden, horrifying gunfight out of nowhere between these two vehicles. And it's like, the fuck? Where did that come from? Also, the mother drives into it. Like, there's this accident and crash that they cause, and then the entire thing is the mother drives into it, and the car flips and everything, and that's how they get injured, and that's how she ends up dying. Why did she drive into it? She didn't even try to turn. She didn't even try to brake. She didn't do anything. She drove into it. It's the crash is literally her fault. Like, and there was very much, it showed that there was enough time for her to do something, even with all the panic setting in. It's not believable that she wouldn't have tried to veer away from that. I'm sorry, it's just not. But yeah, they crash. She gets injured, like, a lot more badly than her son does, and she's even thrown from the car. Paramedics come, but I guess because this world is an absolute hellscape and she's poor, they don't care about her at all. So they just leave her and her son to be. And so he has to take his mother to kind of this shady back alley doctor. And since they're already on like the poorest plan, she can't even get the best medical care. And he can't even see her because visitation apparently is extra. Which it's like, again, isn't a cyberpunk world supposed to be appealing? This is like, again, the most absolutely terrible hellscape I think I've seen in anything. Like, if I were to create a list of fictional worlds I would least want to live in, this would probably be like number one. It is that terrible. It is that absolutely unappealing. And so, because his mother can't afford better care, even though the surgery, like afterwards, appears to go fine, because she can't afford better care, they basically don't continue with actually treating her properly, and her vitals drop suddenly and she dies. And it's like, you know, it's because that they couldn't pay anymore. You know, it's because that they were poor. And it's just like, am I supposed to be enjoying this? Everything is awful. And not even awful in an entertaining way to where it's like, oh, this is like, yeah, everything's terrible and you're going to want to see our main character get out of it. It's like, no, everything's just awful in a way to where it's like, I don't want to watch this. Why would anyone want to watch this? Are you masochists? Um, but then there's also this kind of subplot in there about our main character and his schooling, about him not doing well in school and accepting tech upgrades that he's supposed to get officially, but he's accepting them from basically the black market, you could say. A scientist he knows who gives him like this stuff that's not exactly reliable. Um, and also porn, because it's just got to make it edgy and mature, quote unquote, by adding in porn. And it's like, I like porn. I mean, okay, but what was the point in including it in the way that they did? It felt so unnatural and so like, oh, look at us, we have nudity in our series, we're so edgy. And it's like, oh my god, you're trying way too hard. um it seriously didn't feel naturally put in at all. Um, but he also is being like bullied by these other kids at school, and they claim it's not because of his his lack of wealth and status. Although, like a few seconds later, it literally just turns back on that. It's like even like the main character is like, "Wait, you're saying it's not about all of that, but it's clearly about that," and they just don't deny it. It's like, what was the point of that? What was the point of that scene? But then it's like, okay, so this bully has cybernetic implants, and because of, like, most people apparently do. And because of that, he's able to use, like, this martial arts thing to beat up the main character and everything. And it's just like, okay. Like, I don't understand what's appealing about this. I don't get it. At the end, though, he goes to the doctor, the one who had been giving him the faulty chips and the porn and everything for some reason. And he's like, "You see this thing I've been trying to sell you? We're not going to sell it anymore. It's like this special cybernetic implant. Instead, I want you to graft it into me. Finally, give me a cybernetic upgrade." Um, and that's where the episode ends. And it's just like, I don't get the appeal. I don't understand. This world that it's set in, Night City and everything, is so fucking awful and unenjoyable that it's like, there's no appeal. Again, I swear, Cyberpunk is supposed to be appealing. It's supposed to be interesting. Like you see the technology in the worlds of Treasure Planet. And it's like, oh, that's fascinating. That's interesting. That's appealing. It looks cool. And even though there's some, obviously terrible stuff happening, it's like you kind of would like to be in that world, you know? You look at something like Atlantis the Lost Empire. It's like, "Oh my gosh, it's so beautiful. It's so wonderfully designed." And then you look at this and it's like everything sucks. Everything about this world is terrible. There's literally not a single good thing about the setting. Everything is terrible. Like from a design standpoint, it just looks gross and muddied and unappealing. And from an actual setting standpoint, it's so unbearably terrible there that nothing about it is something that you would ever want to experience. It is like the worst possible kind of like place I can think of again. Um the characters are flat and boring. There's really nothing to say about them because their personalities are as wooden as Plank from Ed, Ed, and Eddie. There's just nothing to them. They are so flat and generic. Even the bully is just this flat, generic, rich ass bully. The designs are eh. They don't really stand out any. The art and animation is great. I'll give it that. The art and animation is well done outside of, again, the city just looking like shit. Like the character like designs, as much as I'm not like super fond of them, it's like they're drawn well. And everything is animated well. But you could say the same about stuff like Kill la Kill or Demon Slayer, and I'm not a fan of those either. Granted, Kill la Kill for very different reasons. That one being, of course, the purposeful and, intentional, I guess same difference, but sexualization of minors and all. While trying to make a message that it's okay to sexualize minors. And Demon Slayer, well, Demon Slayer kind of the same reasons, actually, just because it's super boring and generic. It's just like, it looks pretty, but it's super boring. But yeah, it's like, I'm not going to just like a series because it looks pretty, just because it's flashy and well animated. If the story and characters aren't doing it for me, then that's going to take precedence. But I also noted that this was not like really bad or anything, but it's also not really good either. But that's because everything is so generic and bland that it never really gets a chance to even be bad. It's so flat and blah that it's not good, but it also, again, never really goes to that level where it's actively bad or harmful or just unenjoyable in that kind of sense. It is unenjoyable, but in the fact that it is so meh. Maybe the series gets better. I don't know how many episodes this has in total, but maybe it gets better. But this first episode is so uninteresting. Like, the plot is so generic and has been done a million times and done much better. Again, I point you towards Treasure Planet. Super underrated film there. The characters are so boring and just flat. And while it has good animation and everything, the setting is absolutely shit in both the way it looks and just, how it is. Like, even the fucking schools, it's like this hellscape. Like, oh my god. How does anyone find anything about that setting appealing? I don't understand. I genuinely don't. Like, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the appeal of Cyberpunk for people is the fact that it's absolute hellscape. But I always thought, like, the appeal of it was that it was supposed to be, like, this cool, techie, futuristic thing with, like, a more punk, gritty styling to it. And that it was supposed to still be appealing to both look at and want to, be in. But it's like, it's so unenjoyably terrible, the world that this builds up. And again, everything else is so fucking generic and bland that it just doesn't do anything. They they're telling a story that's been told before with characters that have no depth or real intrigue to them, and it just doesn't do anything to stand on its own. The aesthetic of it, I guess, is the only factor that is unique to it. But again, when it looks like crap, that doesn't really help. It does not look good. I'm sorry. And I know I've probably upset quite a lot of people here. Again, I can see those dislikes just popping off. But I've never been one to shy away from my feelings on things. I've never been one to shy away from my opinion. And I'm not going to start now. This first episode is as unappealing of a premiere of a first episode as you can pretty much get. Again, it's not absolutely despisable or anything. Like, it's not insulting. It's not terrible in quality, but it's so bland that it repels you from wanting to see more, in my opinion, at least. And again, maybe it gets better. Maybe it does. But I do not see the appeal in it. I do not see why someone would watch this and think like, "Oh, this is awesome. This is cool." It's just like, I don't get it. I don't understand. The voice acting's fine. I have no issue with that. The soundtrack is okay, I guess. Nothing special. It's just like, there's so many other things out there I think I would rather watch. Maybe I'll check this out further. I don't know. Maybe I'll check it out with other people's reactions. I believe Rough Senpai is reacting to this, so maybe I'll check it out with his reactions. I think Sione is reacting as well. He's within the same group as Rough Senpai, part of Nani no Anime. He's reacting to it as well, so maybe I'll check out his. Maybe that's maybe that's how I'll watch this series. I'll just watch it through other people's reactions. Which, hey, that's how I actually watched Hunter x Hunter the first time, so no shame in that. There's nothing wrong with that. And maybe I'll come to like it a little more. Honestly, hopefully I do. But for right now, just in my opinion, I don't get it. If you like it, that's great, and I hope you continue to like it. I hope you continue to love it. Same thing with Arcane. I didn't like Arcane either, but if someone else does, I support them in that. And yeah, it's just not my thing, clearly. But again, I'll give it another chance. Check it out with some reactions or something. Um, and maybe it'll appeal to me more. And if by the end of the series, if my opinion turns around like completely, maybe I'll make another video to state so. Just to tell you guys that it's like, oh yeah, I was wrong. I'm a dummy dumb. And hopefully that happens. I really do hope that happens. Like, I want to make that clear. I don't want to hate this series. I don't want to, or even feel meh on this series. I don't want to have any kind of negative reaction to any series I react to or watch on my own time, even. Um, but yeah, this was definitely, for me, a weak start. But hopefully that changes. So, yeah. Either way, tell me in the comments below, what did you think of the first episode of Cyberpunk Edgerunners? And again, if you love this series and everything, all the power to you. I fully support you in that. I just want to make that clear. If you love this series, I am fully behind you on that. I just don't. It's not my thing. And it doesn't have to be. Not every series is going to appeal to every person, even super popular ones. That's just how media works. But yeah, tell me your thoughts down below, and thank you so much for tuning in. For now, I'm Connie, and I'm signing off. See y'all next time.